second. So let's take a look at it and we'll go from there.
Paige announced last year on TikTok that y'all were a couple, and I'm wondering if that is still the case, and if so, if y'all have talked to any other couples in the league about how they negotiate that dynamic as pro teammates.
I understand why you have to ask that question, but we're going to respectfully decline from commenting on our players' personal lives. But next question.
Watch that moment closely. The reporter asks a simple question about two teammates who had already made their relationship public on social media. But before Azzi can even respond, someone interrupts and shuts it down. That isn't really about protecting privacy. It makes it seem like a grown woman can't speak for herself or handle her own situation. The backlash that followed also shows a bigger issue about how the WNBA tries to balance openness while still controlling what can and can't be said.
So imagine if they were starting this 2026 season on the same team, having had whatever beef it was they had, and it certainly sounded like it from what Dejanay has stated. Can you imagine how that impacts team dynamics? Just keep that in mind. And if you keep that in mind, you understand why this is a basketball-related question and why the reporter was inclined to ask it.
This isn't the first time the Dallas Wings have dealt with teammates who are in relationships. They previously had Alyssa Smith and Joni Carrington as a couple on the team. Later, Smith moved to the Las Vegas Aces and won a championship, while Carrington went to Minnesota, got injured, and the two eventually broke up. Their breakup played out very publicly on TikTok, with videos and subtle jabs that made the situation messy and visible to everyone. Now imagine if they had still been on the same team during that time, having to deal with all that tension in the locker room, at practice, and in team meetings. That's why the reporter's question wasn't out of place. It actually made sense in that context.
About DeWanna Bonner and Alyssa Thomas. DeWanna Bonner made a commitment to the Indiana Fever, then decided she needed to go where Alyssa Thomas was. So then she went to Phoenix with Alyssa Thomas. So we have seen some examples of this kind of thing, of couples on the same team.
This isn't the first time the Dallas Wings have dealt with teammates who are in relationships. They previously had Alyssa Smith and Joni Carrington as a couple on the team. Later, Smith moved to the Las Vegas Aces and won a championship, while Carrington went to Minnesota, got injured, and the two eventually broke up. Their breakup played out very publicly on TikTok, with videos and subtle jabs that made the situation messy and visible to everyone. Now imagine if they had still been on the same team during that time, having to deal with all that tension in the locker room, at practice, and in team meetings. That's why the reporter's question wasn't out of place. It actually made sense in that context.
Off by saying, I understand why you have to ask this question. We're not going to do that. Let me go to my social media comment about it. I'd seen the clip. Actually, I think I probably saw people commenting on it before I even saw the clip. Then I saw the clip. And then after a while, the other day, I decided to comment on it on X. And I'm going to give you my thoughts about it. Because notice again,
what the Dallas Wings representative said. I understand why you have to ask that question. That's basically admitting it's a fair question. They recognize why the reporter brought it up and that it's a normal thing people would wonder about. But right after that, they still stop Azzi from answering it. That raises a contradiction. If the question is truly inappropriate, then why say you understand why it was asked? And if it is a reasonable question, then why not let her respond? The Wings end up trying to handle both sides at once, and it only makes the situation look more confusing than clear.
You can't stay out of their personal lives when they are saying, here's our personal lives on a platter for you. You can't have it both ways, right? Right. Here's my comment on X. I wrote, concerning the Azzi question from the reporter, as someone who, until recently, worked in journalism for more than a decade after my teaching.
What makes this even more interesting is that the reporter wasn't exposing anything private. Azzi and Paige Bueckers had already shared their relationship publicly on TikTok last year. They made it visible to millions of people and chose to include it in their public lives. So it's hard to argue that the topic is completely off limits when it was already introduced to the public by them. If someone puts their personal relationship on social media, it naturally becomes part of their public image. That's why asking about it in a professional setting doesn't come out of nowhere. It's already out there.
Opportunity. So again, I think it was an appropriate question. In fact, I think it would be a dereliction of duty if he did not ask the question. And obviously, the Dallas Wings would agree because she said, I understand why you have to ask the question. Why is it a dereliction of duty not to ask the question? Well, journalism, real journalists, ask questions that are on the minds of the public. Like, that's why you're there. She was drafted.
This is where the WNBA's messaging starts to look inconsistent. On one hand, the league often highlights relationships between players. It runs features on WNBA League Pass about who is dating whom, celebrates couples, and even includes relationships as part of its public image. Things like stud buds get talked about, and Pride Month is a big part of the league's branding. But then, when a reporter asks a basic question about a relationship that the players themselves have already made public, it suddenly gets treated as if it's off limits. That creates confusion. Is this something the league wants to openly embrace and talk about, or something that should be kept private? The mixed signals make it hard to understand where the line actually is.
If, in fact, there's some kind of relationship going on between the two. Just as you heard me say, the situation with Alyssa Smith and DeJounte caused a problem. So no, I don't think they should be teammates. And for those who say, how dare you, because there were tons of comments, and I only read like a handful of them, but like, you don't think that they should be able to be teammates? It's not a controversial thing to say that people in relationships don't work together. Like, that's a common policy in serious organizations and serious businesses. So no, I don't think they should be on the same team together.
Real journalism isn't just about asking easy or comfortable questions that already have obvious answers. A journalist's job is to ask the questions people are already thinking about, even if they're awkward or uncomfortable. That matters most when there's an obvious issue everyone notices but no one wants to talk about. In this case, Fudd being drafted number 1 overall to a team where her publicly known girlfriend already plays has led to questions from some people about whether she was the right pick, whether Dallas truly needed her, or whether other factors played a role in the decision. These questions exist whether they are spoken out loud or not. A journalist's role is to bring those conversations into the open and address them directly.
Because they themselves have put themselves out there. Now, if you knew something, a bit of information that was shared with you in confidence, or most people don't know, something like that, then no, I would say inappropriate to ask that question. But these are teammates now. They have told us and shown us that they at least were in a relationship, and those kinds of things do affect.
What makes the Wings' response more problematic is that they stepped in before Azzi could answer. It made it seem like she needed protection, even though she's a grown professional athlete and the number 1 overall draft pick. She's fully capable of handling a question on her own. If she didn't want to answer, she could have said so herself in a professional way, like focusing on basketball and politely declining to discuss her personal life. That would have been completely acceptable and her own choice. Instead, the organization intervened for her, which made the situation look more questionable and raised even more attention than the question itself.
That just yesterday, Friday, we have Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe announcing personal information. You see right here, a personal update. A personal update. And then they go on to tell us that they're no longer a couple. And it wasn't just that. Then they released some kind of statement telling us all about their personal situation.
Now, timing also matters here. Just one day after the press conference situation, there were reports about Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe and their relationship, which were widely discussed across sports media, including outlets like Yahoo Sports. It shows how quickly personal relationship news in sports can become public conversation when athletes choose to share or when media covers it.
Here you have Yahoo Sports covering it. Megan Rapinoe, Sue Bird. So they chose to announce a separation, to put it all out there. And of course, Paige Bueckers had also announced, and Azzi Fudd, right along with her, demonstrated that they were a couple. It was their decision to do so. They made it public. Before, they were professional teammates, played together at UConn. Then they're professional teammates. It's the right question to ask. And it's also the right question to allow Azzi to handle however she chooses to handle it. The WNBA needs to decide how the WNBA wants to conduct itself. And as an activist league, as a political league, which it is, as a league that constantly like throws this up. They do things
There's
on
another
WNBA.
angle worth considering. In many professional workplaces, companies have policies about romantic relationships between coworkers, especially when those relationships could affect teamwork, performance, or decision-making. This is common in the business world and isn't seen as unusual. Whether the WNBA should have similar policies is a separate debate. But it's not unreasonable to talk about whether teammates in a relationship might face added challenges.
And all the prop up, all the stud buds and all this, a term I just don't use because I'm really not trying to do all that. I'm really not. But that's what's been propped up. And so why are you surprised then when you get a question about something that obviously you're pushing out there? So to try to make the reporter who's doing his job and asking the questions that everybody else wants to know, but too scared to ask, why are you trying to make him out to be the bad
Here's
guy?
what the reporter actually asked. He referenced that Paige had already announced the relationship on TikTok last year, then asked if that was still the case. He also asked whether they had talked to other couples in the league about how they manage that kind of dynamic as professionals. That's really all. It was no trick, no gotcha moment, just a straightforward question about something that was already publicly known. It also gave Azzi a chance to talk about professionalism, learning from experienced players, and how they handle a unique situation.
Faith in the Lord. Other than that, I have no idea what is going on. I just know what she said. I don't know. But it's a fair question. In fact, it's a perfect question. It's the right question. If he were being nasty or disrespectful, that would be one thing, but he just asked the question. She would be perfectly within her rights and abilities, I imagine, to say, we are consummate professionals, and I haven't spoken to anyone, or have spoken, and we intend to be as professional as everyone else in this situation, which is a scary thought because some of the folks have not been professional. Remember Dejanay and Alyssa Smith and their TikToks or whatever the videos are, making fun of things about Caitlin Clark, all the stuff that happens, and just a bad look, etc. But again, I just wanted to weigh in on this. This is a part of the culture of the WNBA, and therefore you can't then shy away from it, but also treat Azzi with enough respect that she can handle her business. She can handle her business and answer questions, or say, I don't want to answer the question. But the answer is not to not ask the question. That's not what journalists do, not real ones. But I'm not fine with them playing gatekeeper. What are you hiding?
There's another important detail here. Azzi recently shared publicly that she was baptized and has committed her life to faith. That's another part of her personal life she chose to make public, so now the situation looks like this. She has openly shared aspects of her life, including her relationship and her faith journey. That raises a bigger question. When a player shares personal information publicly, who decides what can or cannot be asked about it later? Is it the player, the team, or the league?
That Azzi, would not have been chosen number one had it not been for Paige's influence. I don't know. That's just some of the thoughts out there. I'll catch you next time.
Let's be clear about what happened in that press conference. A reporter asked a fair question about a situation the players themselves had already made public. The Wings even admitted they understood why the question was asked, but then stepped in and stopped their new star player from answering. That intervention changed the story. If Azzi had simply been allowed to respond, this likely would have been a small, forgettable moment. She could have answered briefly, declined to comment, or redirected the focus to basketball. Any of those would have been normal and professional.